He smelled like cedarwood and broken promises, and I knew the second his scent cut through the cold Chicago air and wrapped itself around my throat like a hand I once loved, that my 5 years of running had just come to an end. Not today, please, not in front of my son. My name is Seo Jiwon, and I have exactly 4 minutes before the school bell rings. I know this because I've timed it. Every morning for the past 2 years, since Haeon started first grade at Lakeview Elementary, and I've stood at this exact spot on the sidewalk outside the school gate, coffee in one hand, his dinosaur backpack strap in the other, counting the seconds until I can hand him off to his teacher and exhale. 4 minutes means everything is still okay. 4 minutes means we're still invisible. I'm 28 years old, an Omega working as a freelance translator for a mid-sized Korean-American trade firm based out of the West Loop. My apartment is small but warm. My son is healthy. My suppressants are refilled every 30 days without fail, and my scent, cedar, masked, and carefully neutral, has never once slipped in public. I built this life with both hands, quietly, deliberately. The way you build something when you know exactly what happens if it falls apart. Don't think about him. Don't. Appa. Haeon tugs my sleeve, his small face tilted up at me. He has a gap where his left front tooth used to be. And when he smiles, that gap makes my chest ache in a way I cannot explain to anyone. You're doing the face again? What face? The one that looks like you swallowed a lemon. I look down at him and feel the familiar, bone-deep pull of love that has kept me standing upright for 5 years. He's wearing his navy blue jacket, the one with the patch of a rocket ship on the left shoulder that he picked himself. His backpack bounces as he shifts his weight. His eyes, dark and sharp and entirely too perceptive for a 6-year-old, watch me the way only he does. The way that sometimes makes my heart stop, because those eyes are not mine. I'm fine, I tell him, and I make myself smile. Go, your teacher's waving. He squints at me for 1 more second, deciding whether to believe me, then spins on his heel and runs through the gate. I watch him until he disappears through the double doors. Then I breathe. 4 minutes. We're still okay. I pull my coat tighter, tuck my chin down, and turn toward the sidewalk. That's when the wind shifts. It's subtle, the way the air changes before a storm, pressure dropping, something heavy and warm curling at the edge of my senses. My suppressants should block it. They always block it. But some scents don't care about chemistry or careful planning. Some scents are bone deep and old, and they reach you anyway. Cedarwood, dark amber, something clean underneath, like cold water over stone. So my body recognizes it before my mind does. My steps slow. My hand tightens around my coffee cup until the cardboard crinkles. The back of my neck prickles, every fine hair rising in a single, slow wave. And somewhere beneath my ribs, something I buried 5 years ago cracks open like ice in spring. No, I don't turn around. I should keep walking. I should put 1 foot in front of the other and move and not stop until I'm 3 blocks away and inside a cab and gone. I know this. My body knows this. Every careful, calculated instinct I've spent 5 years sharpening screams it at me in perfect clarity. I turn around anyway. He's standing across the street. Kang Taeoh. He's taller than I remember, or maybe I just forgot what it felt like to see him take up space. He's wearing a charcoal overcoat, open at the collar, no tie, and he's looking down at his phone with the same focused stillness he always carried. Like the world around him is a minor inconvenience he's chosen to tolerate. His hair is shorter now, neat at the sides, and there are 5 years sitting on his face that weren't there before. A sharpness at the jaw, a weight behind the eyes that even distance can't hide. He is without question the most powerful Omega-designated alpha in the Kang Group empire, heir to a Fortune 500 conglomerate, and the most ruthless deal closer in Chicago's corporate hierarchy. Sure, he is also the only person on earth who can destroy everything I've built. He hasn't seen me yet. Move, Jiwon. Move right now. My feet don't move. A black SUV idles at the curb behind him. 2 men in dark suits stand nearby, the quiet, watchful kind that scream private security. A woman with a tablet approaches him, and he takes it without looking up, scrolls once, hands it back, says something I can't hear. efficient, controlled, every motion precise and deliberate. The same way he used to touch me. Stop. I yank my gaze away and stare at the pavement. My heart is doing something loud and terrible inside my chest, and I press my free hand flat against my sternum like I can physically hold it steady. He doesn't know about Haeon. No one does except my mother, and she has kept that secret with the ferocity of a woman who watched her child bleed. I left before I was even showing. I transferred my work remote. I changed my number, my address, my routine. Afren and I have been careful every single day for 5 years. He doesn't know. He can't know. Then why is he here? Why is he standing outside my son's school? The wind shifts again, and this time when I look up, Kang Taeoh is no longer looking at his phone. He is looking directly at me. The tablet slips from the assistant's hands. Taeoh doesn't notice. He doesn't move. He doesn't blink. He just stares at me from across the street with an expression I have never seen on his face in the 3 years I knew him. Not during board meetings, not during arguments, not even on the night everything ended. He looks like a man who just remembered something he was never supposed to forget. And then slowly, his gaze moves. Past me. To the school doors. Oh God, I had exactly one thought in that moment. Not a prayer, not a plan. Just one raw, desperate thought that swallowed every careful thing I'd ever built. He already knows. That thought didn't float. It dropped. Straight through my chest, through my stomach, through the sidewalk beneath my feet, all the way down to somewhere cold and airless where rational thinking goes to die. My coffee cup hit the ground before I realized I'd let it go. I didn't pick it up. Taeoh's eyes were still moving. Slow, deliberate. Iron tracking the space between me and the school doors like he was solving a problem, connecting points on a map I had spent 5 years erasing. I watched his chest rise with a single breath. I watched something shift behind his eyes. Not recognition exactly. More like the moment before recognition. That suspended half-second when the mind knows but hasn't admitted it yet. Run. My legs finally agreed with my brain. I turned left, cut between 2 parked cars, and walked fast without running because running would look like guilt, and guilt would look like confirmation, and I was not, under any circumstances, going to hand Kang Taeoh a single piece of evidence on a silver platter on a Tuesday morning outside a Chicago elementary school. I am Seo Jiwon. I survived leaving him. I survived a pregnancy alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Seattle with nothing but my mother's voice on the phone and a second-hand crib I assembled wrong 3 times. I survived the exhaustion and the grief and the specific hollow ache of loving someone you can never go back to. I did not survive all of that to fall apart on a public sidewalk because the man looked up from his phone. Absolutely not. I turned the corner onto Halstead and kept moving. 3 blocks. That's how far I made it before my body staged a full protest. I stopped in the doorway of a dry cleaner that hadn't opened yet, pressed my back against the cold glass, and focused on breathing like it was a skill I'd recently acquired and wasn't entirely confident in. My hands were shaking. Not the dramatic movie-style trembling that looks meaningful, the small, invisible kind, the kind that lives in your fingertips and gives everything away if anyone looks close enough. He didn't follow you. He's a CEO. He has a tablet and a security detail and a whole empire to run. He is not chasing you down Halstead Street. I pressed 2 fingers to my wrist and felt my pulse. Fast, very fast. Embarrassingly fast for someone who told themselves 5 years ago they were completely over it. Here is the thing about suppressants. They block your scent. They regulate the biological responses that make omegas readable, trackable, findable. They are, in every clinical sense, a wall, and I have maintained that wall with the dedication of a person who understood exactly what was on the other side of it. But suppressants cannot touch memory, and my body remembered Kang Taeoh the way it remembered breathing. Not consciously, not willingly, just automatically, stupidly, at the cellular level, like something written in before I had any say in the matter. Cedarwood, dark amber, cold water over stone. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth. Stop it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I stared at it for 4 full seconds. Then I hit decline. I dropped the phone in my coat pocket and started walking again. Faster this time, chin up, shoulders back, the specific posture I'd developed working in corporate spaces as an Omega, who needed people to take him seriously on the first try and not the third. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Same one. I declined it again. It buzzed a third time. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I said out loud. To no one. To the general universe. To whatever cosmic force decided today was a good day to detonate 5 years of careful living. I answered it. Silence first. Just the ambient sound of wind and distant traffic, and underneath that, the soft, controlled exhale of someone who had been waiting. Then his voice. Jiwon. One word. My name. That was all, and I felt it everywhere. His voice had always done that. Low and even, with this particular texture that sat somewhere between a question and a statement. Like he was certain of the answer, but wanted to see if you'd give it freely. It was the voice he used in boardrooms. I'd heard recordings. It was the voice he used when he already knew something and was giving you the professional courtesy of pretending he didn't. I pulled every calm thing I owned to the surface and said, "I think you have the wrong number." A pause. "Your coffee cup is still on the sidewalk outside Lakeview Elementary." Another pause, shorter. "You always hated littering." My jaw tightened. He noticed the coffee cup. Of course he noticed the coffee cup. The man once caught a contractual discrepancy in a 70-page document during a dinner party. "I'm going to be late for work," I said. Very normal, very unbothered, extremely lying. "Jiwon." His voice dropped half a register. Not angry, something worse than angry, quiet, certain. "I need you to tell me I'm wrong." My feet stopped moving. The morning crowd pushed past me on both sides. Someone's shoulder clipped mine. A cab horn blared half a block up. The city kept going, indifferent and loud, and I stood in the middle of it holding a phone against my ear while my entire carefully constructed life balanced on the edge of the next 4 seconds. Tell him he's wrong. It's easy. 2 words. You're wrong. That's it. "About what?" I said instead, because I have always been my own worst enemy. His breath shifted. Something in it that I recognized and immediately wished I didn't. The sound Taeoh made when something he suspected became something he knew. "The child," he said quietly. "He has my eyes." The phone stayed at my ear. I didn't speak. I didn't deny it. And in that silence, which lasted maybe 3 seconds and felt like a building coming down floor by floor, Kang Taeoh got the only answer he needed. 5 years of silence, and I broke it without saying a single word. Shit. So I did what any reasonable, emotionally intelligent adult would do in that situation. I hung up, not slammed, not dramatically, just pressed the red button with my thumb, slid the phone into my pocket with the kind of practiced calm that belongs on a movie screen, and resumed walking like I had somewhere to be, in a whole personality that wasn't currently dissolving on a Chicago sidewalk. My phone buzzed again immediately. I turned it a face down in my pocket. It buzzed again. "And I'm okay," I said under my breath to myself, to the version of me that thought moving to Chicago 2 years ago was a reasonable and safe decision. Okay, we're fine. This is fine." A woman walking her dog gave me a look. "I'm talking to myself," I told her. "It's a coping mechanism. Highly recommended." She walked faster. Fair enough. The thing about Kang Taeoh is that he does not buzz twice and give up. I knew that about him before I knew almost anything else. He is the kind of man who, at 26, restructured an entire subsidiary in 3 weeks because someone told him it would take 6 months. He doesn't hear the word impossible. It just sounds like a starting point to him. It's magnetic and infuriating in equal measure. And it is the reason I fell for him in the first place. And it is absolutely the reason I am now walking at a speed that borders on athletic while pretending I'm not fleeing. My phone stopped buzzing. I exhaled. Then a black SUV pulled up slowly alongside me, matching my pace exactly, and the passenger window rolled down. I stopped walking. The SUV stopped. I looked straight ahead at the middle distance, at absolutely nothing, with the focused expression of a man who has fully transcended this situation. "Jiwon!" His voice came through the open window, low and even. "Get in the car." "I have legs," I said pleasantly. "Functional ones. Thank you, though. It's 32 degrees. I'm warm-blooded. A pause. You're shivering. That's just personality. I heard something that might have been the beginning of a sigh, quickly controlled. Taeoh had always hated losing conversational ground. He was exceptional at hiding it, but I had spent 3 years learning the difference between his silences, and that particular one had a very specific flavor. The flavor of a man recalibrating. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I'm asking. You're asking, I repeated, and I did look at him then, because I wanted him to see my face when I said the next part. That's new. His expression didn't crack. It never did, not visibly, but something in his eyes shifted, and I cataloged it before I could stop myself. The way you catalog things about people you trained yourself to stop loving, and clearly did not finish the job. Please, he said. That word and that voice, with that particular weight behind it, was deeply unfair, and he absolutely knew it. I looked at the SUV. I looked at the sidewalk ahead of me. I ran a rapid mental calculation of my options, my dignity, and the Chicago wind chill. 5 minutes, I said, and I want it noted that I'm doing this for thermal reasons only. The inside of the SUV smelled like him. That was the first problem. Cedarwood and amber and that clean undertone that my suppressant-dulled senses still managed to identify with criminal accuracy. It hit me the second I pulled the door shut, wrapped around me like something warm and old and deeply unwelcome, and I sat as close to my door as physically possible without actually opening it back up and falling onto the street. Taeoh sat on the opposite end of the seat. His security driver was separated by a partition. It was just us, which was the second problem. He looked at me the way he used to when he was deciding how to start a difficult conversation. Direct, patient. I mean, like he had already arranged all the words and was simply choosing the right moment to deploy them. I crossed my arms and looked out the windshield. You have 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and I said. His name, Taeoh said quietly. What is it? My jaw tightened. That's what you lead with. What would you prefer I lead with? Oh, I don't know. Maybe Jiwon. I'm sorry for what happened 5 years ago. Maybe Jiwon. I should have called. Maybe literally anything that acknowledges that there's a before and that the before matters. He was quiet for a moment. You changed your number. I did. You left without a word. I did that too. I finally looked at him. Funny how that happens when someone makes it clear you're not a priority. Something moved across his face. Fast. Gone before I could name it. That's not what happened, he said. Seo Jiwon. I said his name with the specific patience of someone who has rehearsed this moment approximately 900 times in the shower and is now watching the actual version be somehow more aggravating than any of the rehearsals. I was there. I have a very solid memory and excellent recall. Don't tell me what happened. You didn't give me a chance to explain. You didn't give me a reason to stay. I held his gaze. Those are two very different sentences. The SUV had stopped moving. I didn't remember it stopping. The city hummed outside the windows, muffled and gray. And inside the car, the air was doing something complicated, warm and tight and full of things neither of us was saying yet. Taeoh looked at me for a long moment. Tell me his name, he said again. Softer this time. Not a command. Something rawer than that. I looked out the window, my hands hidden inside my coat sleeves, curled into fists. His name is Haeon, I thought. And he's 6 years old, and he has your eyes, and he builds dinosaur habitats out of couch cushions, and he is the single best thing that ever happened to me. And you do not get to walk into our life on a Tuesday like it costs you nothing. What I said out loud was, time's up. I reached for the door handle. His hand closed around my wrist. Not hard, not restraining, just warm and certain, the way Taeoh touched things he wasn't willing to let go of yet. Jiwon, he said. I'm not walking away from this. I looked down at his hand on my wrist. I looked up at his face, and the worst part, the part I would never admit to another living soul, was that some traitorous, exhausted piece of me was relieved. Relieved that someone finally knew. I hated myself a little for that. Let go, I said quietly. He did. Immediately. No argument. And somehow that was worse than if he'd held on. The door opened. The cold air hit me. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and didn't look back. But his scent followed me for the next 4 blocks. It always did. Think he's going to let Jiwon just walk away like that? You already know the answer. Act 4 is coming, and forced proximity has never felt this dangerous. His scent followed me for 4 blocks. I know because I counted. 1 block, cedarwood, faint but present, threading through the cold air like it had somewhere to be. 2 blocks, amber underneath it, the warmer note, the one that used to mean safety and now meant something considerably more complicated. 3 blocks. I told myself I couldn't smell it anymore. I was almost convincing. 4 blocks. I stopped pretending. I ducked into the first coffee shop I found, a small place called Bora on the corner of Halstead and Willow, pushed through the glass door, and stood in the warmth for a moment with my eyes closed. The smell of espresso and steamed milk wrapped around me like a replacement. Something neutral. Something that belonged to no one. Better. That was better. I got in line behind a man in a puffy orange coat and pulled out my phone to check the time. 40 minutes before my first remote call of the day. I could work from here, order something, open my laptop, translate a commercial contract between a Korean shipping firm and a Chicago logistics company, and be a completely normal person who had not just spent the last 20 minutes of his life in a car with the father of his child. Yet normal, perfectly normal. The line moved. I stepped forward. The door behind me opened, bringing cold air and the sound of traffic, and cedarwood. I closed my eyes for exactly 1 second. Then I turned around with the expression of a man who has exceeded his daily limit of nonsense and would like to speak to whoever is in charge of his fate. Taeoh stood just inside the door. He'd left the security detail outside. He was alone, coat open, hands in his pockets, looking at me with the particular calm of a man who had absolutely anticipated this moment and prepared accordingly. You followed me, I said. I walked in the same direction. Into the same coffee shop. It looked warm. Taeoh. Jiwon. The man in the orange coat in front of me turned around to observe this exchange with undisguised interest. I gave him a polite smile. He turned back around. Smart man. Oh, I ordered a black coffee because I had already lost one to the sidewalk this morning, and I refused to lose the emotional battle too. Taeoh ordered nothing. He simply followed me to the small table near the window at the back, the one I chose specifically because it faced the wall and not the room, and sat down across from me like I had invited him. I opened my laptop. He waited. I pulled up my translation document. He waited. When I read the same opening paragraph 4 times without absorbing a single word. You can't just sit there, I said, not looking up. I'm not doing anything. You're breathing very intentionally. That's called staying alive. I looked up at him. He looked back at me. His face was composed, professionally neutral, which would have been convincing if I hadn't known him for 3 years and learned that Taeoh's composure was not the absence of feeling. It was the very precise management of it. A levee, not a drought. And right now that levee was working very hard. Here's what's going to happen, I said, keeping my voice low and even. I'm going to work for the next 35 minutes. You're going to leave. And then we're going to separately think about whether this conversation needs to happen at all. It does, he said immediately. I wasn't finished. I was still in the part where you leave. Jiwon. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, voice dropping. Or I saw him. For maybe 4 seconds through a school gate, across a street, and I knew. You understand what I'm telling you? I knew the way I know my own name. My hands stilled on the keyboard. That's biology, I said carefully. That's pack instinct. That doesn't mean anything legally or emotionally or in any way that is relevant to our current situation. He's my son. 2 words. No question mark. Not even a tremor. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Because the ceiling had not said anything devastating today, and I found it restful. You don't know that, I said. You didn't deny it in the car. I didn't confirm it either. Jiwon. His voice had shifted. Something underneath the composure was surfacing now, slow and pressurized like heat through glass. 5 years. You were gone for 5 years, and you never told me. I need you to help me understand that. Not for a legal reason, not for the company. Just. He stopped. and pressed his thumb against the edge of the table. Just because I need to understand it. That last part was quiet in a way that Taeoh almost never was. I looked at him for a long moment. The coffee shop hummed around us. Someone's order was called at the counter. A chair scraped. The window beside us was fogging slightly at the edges from the warmth inside against the cold outside. And I watched the condensation creep across the glass and thought about how much easier this would be if I felt nothing. "You were engaged," I said. "When I left. Do you remember that?" His jaw tightened. That situation was not what it appeared to be. It appeared to be you at a formal dinner with Oh Serene on your arm and an announcement in the Kang Group press release. I tilted my head. Which part was I misreading? He opened his mouth. My phone rang. We both looked at it on the table between us. The screen read, Haeon's school. The temperature in my body dropped 6 degrees. I picked it up before the second ring. "Hello, Mr. Seo. This is Miss Park from Lakeview Elementary. I'm sorry to call, but Haeon had a small incident at recess. He's okay, just a scraped knee and a bit upset. Would you be able to come in?" "I'll be there in 10 minutes, I said. I hung up. Taeoh was watching me. He had heard every word. And the coffee shop was small and he was right there. And his hearing was, unfortunately, excellent. I started closing my laptop. "I'll drive you," he said. "No, it's faster. I'm aware. Jiwon, he's hurt." I stopped. My hands were flat on the table. My laptop was half closed. The word hurt had done something to my chest that I didn't appreciate. And Taeoh had said it in a way that made it clear it had done something to his too. I looked at him. He looked at me. "What, you sit in the back," I said. "You don't talk to him. You don't introduce yourself. You don't look at him like that." "Like what?" "Like he's already yours." Something moved through his eyes, fast and unguarded, gone before I could examine it properly. "Okay," he said quietly. We stood up at the same time. The SUV was warm. Taeoh sat on his side. I sat on mine. The partition between us and the driver was closed, and the city moved past the windows in gray and steel and winter light. And neither of us spoke. But halfway to the school, I noticed Taeoh's hand on the seat between us. Not reaching, not moving, just open, palm up. The way you hold your hand out when you're not asking for anything, but you want someone to know the offer exists. I looked at it for 3 full seconds. Then I looked out the window, but I didn't move to the other side of the seat. We were 2 minutes from the school, and I had just made the first mistake of many, which was letting him come. Because Kang Taeoh was about to walk through those school doors, and Haon, my brilliant, sharp-eyed, deeply observant 6-year-old with his father's eyes and his father's instincts, was going to take one look at him, and then I was going to have to explain something I had been rehearsing for 6 years and still hadn't figured out how to say. How do you tell your son that the stranger he's about to meet is the man who gave him those eyes? Stay with me. Act 5 is where everything bleeds open. We were 2 minutes from the school. I spent both of them staring out the window, running through every possible version of what was about to happen and finding 0 versions that ended cleanly. Han was perceptive in the specific, unnerving way that 6-year-olds sometimes are before the world teaches them to stop paying attention. He noticed things adults filtered out. He had once asked me why our neighbor Mrs. Cho smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. And I had stood in the hallway for a full minute trying to formulate an answer that didn't sound like an introduction to existential dread. He was going to look at Taeoh, and then he was going to look at me. And then he was going to ask a question I was not ready for, in that direct, guileless way he had. The way that bypassed every carefully constructed adult defense and went straight for the soft tissue. The SUV stopped. I had the door open before the driver finished parking. "Wish, remember what I said," I told Taeoh without looking at him. "You observe. That's it." "Understood," he said quietly. I got out. Lakeview Elementary smelled like floor wax, crayon, and the specific institutional warmth of a building full of small children. The front office had a mural of the Chicago skyline painted along one wall, slightly lopsided, clearly done by students, and I had always liked it for that reason. Honest art. No pretense. Miss Park met me at the front desk. And a warm woman in her 40s with reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She smiled when she saw me. The practiced, reassuring smile of someone who has delivered minor injury news to anxious parents approximately 10,000 times. "He's okay," she said first, which I appreciated. "Scraped his knee on the blacktop. He was more upset than hurt, I think. He's in the nurse's office." "What happened?" "He tripped during a running game. Another student bumped into him." She paused, glancing briefly past my shoulder. I did not turn around. I knew Taeoh had followed me in. I could smell him in the warm indoor air, cedar wood cutting through crayon and floor wax like it owned the building. "Is this—" "A colleague," I said smoothly. "He was with me when I got the call. He'll wait here." I looked over my shoulder at Taeoh with a specific expression that meant, "Do not move, do not speak, do not exist too loudly." He met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. "Ms. A Park accepted this with the diplomatic neutrality of a woman who had seen many complicated family situations walk through her front office and had learned not to editorialize. "Right this way," she said. Han was sitting on the narrow cot in the nurse's office with his left pant leg rolled up and a cartoon bandage covering his knee. A dinosaur bandage, naturally. He had probably requested it specifically. The nurse, a young man named Mr. Yun, who Han adored because he kept a jar of individually wrapped caramels on his desk, was sitting nearby filling out a form. Hyun looked up when I walked in. His expression did the thing it always did when he saw me after something hard had happened. Not crumbling, not dramatic, just this quiet, immediate settling, like a held breath finally released. Like his nervous system recognized mine and decided it was allowed to stand down. That look destroyed me every single time. "Hey," I said, crossing the room and crouching in front of him. I looked at the bandage, then at his face. His eyes were dry. He had cried earlier, I could tell from the slight puffiness at the corners, but he had pulled himself back together before I arrived. My son, always composing himself. "It was Minjae's fault," he informed me. "Was it?" He cut across my lane. "You had a lane. It was an informal lane. Everyone knew." He looked at his knee with the gravity of a person reviewing a crime scene. "When I'm going to need a few days of rest, probably." "From school?" "From running specifically. Maybe also from vegetables. For recovery purposes." I pressed my lips together. "That's not how recovery works." "I've been researching." "You're 6. "I've been researching for 6 years," he said seriously. I looked at him for a moment. This ridiculous, wonderful person I made, and felt the love move through me like a current. Warm and total and a little painful, the way all the best things were. "Can you walk?" I asked. "Obviously." He slid off the cot and demonstrated by taking 3 steps toward me with only a minimal, dramatic limp. "See? Fine. Very convincing. Thank you. I've been working on it." I signed the release form. Mr. Yoon handed Haeon a caramel from the jar, which Haeon accepted with the solemnity of someone receiving a medal. We walked back down the corridor toward the front office, Haeon's hand in mine, his backpack now retrieved from his classroom, the caramel wrapper crinkling in his other fist. I was planning the exact words I would use to tell Taeoh to go wait in the SUV. I had a whole sentence prepared. Professional, firm, reasonable. Then Haeon stopped walking. I felt it through our joined hands, the sudden stillness, the way his small fingers tightened slightly around mine. I looked down at him. He was staring straight ahead toward the front office, where Taeoh stood near the entrance wall, coat still on, hands in his pockets, and looking at the student-painted skyline mural with his back partially turned. Haeon stared at him, his head tilted, slowly, the way it did when he was processing something that didn't fit any existing category. "Appa," he said quietly, not looking away. Who is that man?" My heart did something complicated and physically uncomfortable. "Someone from work," I said. Calm. Easy. A sentence I had technically used before. Han considered this. "He smells like you," he said simply. The floor dropped out from under me, not like my scent. I knew what he meant. He meant the scent that lived underneath my suppressants, the one that had been altered 5 years ago and never fully returned to baseline. The one that, in the language of Omegaverse biology that a 6-year-old shouldn't have been able to read yet, but apparently could, meant bond adjacent. meant familiar, meant pack. I did not respond. Taeoh turned around. He and Han looked at each other across the width of the front office. And Haeon, my son, who had his father's eyes and his father's stillness, and absolutely his father's unnerving ability to see through everything, said the next thing with complete calm. He has my eyes, Haeon said. That's interesting. I could not speak, not because I had nothing to say, but because every sentence I had prepared for this moment over 6 years evaporated simultaneously. Taeoh was very still across the room. His jaw was tight. His hands, still in his pockets, were not relaxed anymore. And his eyes, the ones my son had just calmly identified as a shared feature, were fixed on Haeon with an expression that broke through every layer of composure he owned. Raw, unguarded, devastated in the quietest possible way. He looked like a man seeing something he had lost before he knew it was gone. Haeon unwrapped his caramel, put it in his mouth. He looked between me and the stranger with his eyes and said with 6-year-old directness that should be illegal, "Are we going to talk about it or not?" I raised a child who asked the questions I've been avoiding for 5 years. Act 6 is where the walls finally come down. Stay with me. Are we going to talk about it or not? Han said it the way he said most things, plainly, without performance. Like he was simply identifying a conversational gap that needed filling and was generously offering to fill it. I looked down at him. He looked up at me, caramel in cheek, completely unbothered. I looked across the room at Taeoh. Taeoh looked back at me with the expression of a man who had walked into this situation voluntarily and was now experiencing the full consequences of that decision. I turned back to my son. How about lunch first, I said. Haeon considered this negotiation with genuine seriousness. What kind of lunch? The kind with japchae. A pause. From the place on Belmont? Sure. He nodded once, decisive. Okay, but we're talking after. After, I agreed. He looked across the room at Taeoh one more time, cataloged whatever information his terrifyingly functional instincts had gathered, and then walked toward the exit door with the calm authority of someone who had just successfully brokered a deal. I exhaled through my nose. Taeoh made a sound that was almost a laugh. I pointed at him. Not a word. The restaurant was 12 minutes away. Haeon sat in the middle of the back seat between us, which was either the universe's idea of comedy or a 6-year-old's tactical genius, and I genuinely could not rule out the latter. He had his backpack on his lap and was looking out the window with the serene expression of someone who had created a situation and was now simply waiting for it to develop. Taeoh sat on his side with his hands folded and said nothing. I sat on my side and communicated entirely through eye contact with the window. What's your name? Haeon asked. I felt Taeoh go still. Taeoh, he said. His voice was careful, measured. Like he was holding something very fragile and didn't want his grip to show. Han tried it. Taeoh. 2 syllables, deliberate. That's a good name. Thank you. Mine is Haeon. I know, Taeoh said quietly. Haeon turned to look at him with sharp, assessing eyes. How? A beat. Taeoh glanced at me. I looked out the window with tremendous focus. Your appa mentioned it, Taeoh said. Smooth. Technically not a lie, given that I had not explicitly told him not to say that. Haeon accepted this, turned back to the window, and after a moment said, I hurt my knee today. I heard. Does it hurt now? A little, but I got a dinosaur bandage, so it's mostly fine. Which dinosaur? Haeon looked down at his knee, then back up. Stegosaurus. Not my first choice, but Mr. Yoon was out of T-Rex. Unfortunate, Taeoh said with the gravity the situation deserved. Very, Han agreed. I was looking out the window and my throat was doing something tight and traitorous because this exact thing, the careful normalcy of it, the way Taeoh was speaking to my son like he was a complete person whose preferences mattered, was not what I had prepared for. I had prepared for demands, for legal language, for the cold, strategic version of Kang Taeoh that closed deals and restructured companies. I had not prepared for this version, the one that asked which dinosaur. The restaurant was warm and mostly empty at this hour, caught between the breakfast and lunch rush. We got a corner booth. Haeon slid in first and immediately began rearranging the table's small condiment bottles into a lineup he found more logical. Taeoh sat across from him. I sat beside Hound and picked up the menu I already knew by heart. The owner, an older woman who knew us as regulars, we came to take our order with a warm smile that shifted into mild curiosity when she registered Taeoh's presence. I ordered for Hyeon before she could ask anything. Taeoh ordered quietly in Korean, which made the owner's eyebrows lift with pleased surprise. She left. Han had organized the condiments to his satisfaction and now folded his hands on the table. "Okay," he said. "You have the same eyes as me." Taeoh met his gaze steadily. "Yes." "And you knew my name?" "Yes." "And you were outside my school this morning, even though Appa says you're a work person." A pause. "Yes," Taeoh said. Han nodded slowly, processing. Then he looked at me. "Appa, is this my dad?" The condiment bottles blurred slightly. I set the menu down. I had thought about this question since before Hound could form sentences. I had drafted answers in my head during late nights and early mornings, in the shower, during long translation sessions, on the train, anywhere the silence got wide enough to think. I had gentle versions and honest versions and age-appropriate versions, and I had none of them right now because none of them had accounted for Hyeon asking in a corner booth with japchae on the way and Taeoh sitting 3 feet away. "Yeah," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "He is." Han looked at Taeoh. Taeoh looked at Hyeon. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Hyeon said, with tremendous practicality, "Why didn't you live with us?" The question landed in the center of the table like something dropped from a height. I watched Taeoh's throat move, watched him absorb the question, feel it, organize himself around it. "Because I didn't know about you," Taeoh said, carefully, honestly. "That wasn't your fault, or your Appa's, not entirely. It was complicated." Han considered this. "Were you and Appa fighting?" "We were." A pause. "And we're still figuring it out." "My friend Sungwoo's parents fight," Hyeon offered, "but they still eat dinner together on Fridays." "That's good," Taeoh said softly. "You could eat dinner with us on a Friday," Hyeon said, simply, casually, like he was suggesting a minor scheduling adjustment and not detonating 6 years of deliberate distance. I opened my mouth, closed it. Taeoh looked at me across the table, and there it was again, that unguarded thing in his eyes. The one that bypassed every wall he owned. Not asking permission exactly. Something quieter than that. Asking if it was possible. If there was still a version of this where possible existed. The food arrived. The owner set down Haeun's japchae with a warm word, set down our dishes, and left us in the corner booth with steam rising from the plates and winter light coming through the window, and a silence that was fragile and full, and entirely unlike the silences from this morning. Haeun picked up his chopsticks and started eating with the focus of someone who had resolved the major issues and could now attend to practical matters. I watched him for a moment. Then I looked at Taeoh. He was still watching me. "Friday," I said quietly. Not a yes, not quite, but not a no. Taeoh's eyes softened at the edges, just barely, just enough. "Friday," he said. It should have felt like a beginning, and maybe it did, for about 4 minutes, which was how long it took for my phone to buzz with a news alert that someone in the booth behind me was reading aloud to their companion. Kang Group CEO Kang Taeoh spotted in Chicago's Lakeview neighborhood. Sources close to the family confirm renewed talks regarding previously announced merger with the O family's Sarin Holdings. O Sarin expected to arrive in Chicago by end of week. My chopsticks went still. Across the table, Taeoh's expression changed. He had seen it on my face before I could hide it. "Jiwon," he said immediately. "It's fine," I said. "Let me explain." "It's fine," I said again, and this time I meant something entirely different by it, and we both knew it. "Oh, Sarin." I set my chopsticks down with the kind of care you use when your hands are not entirely trustworthy. Haeun was eating, head down, focused, working through his japchae with the dedication of a person who took noodles seriously. He hadn't heard the alert. Or if he hadn't connected it to anything yet. 6 years old and already the most emotionally intelligent person at this table, but even he had a limit to what he could track simultaneously. I kept my face neutral. I was exceptional at keeping my face neutral. 5 years of solo parenting, corporate translation work, and being an omega in rooms that expected you to be decorative had given me a specific kind of control over my own expression, in the kind that looks like calm and functions like armor. Jiwon, Taeoh said again. I heard you the first time, I said pleasantly. I picked my chopsticks back up. Eat your food. It's not what the article implies. The article implies the O family merger is back on the table, and Oh Serin is flying to Chicago. I tilted my head at him with a smile that was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Which part is being misrepresented? His jaw tightened. Han looked up, looked at Taeoh, looked at me, read the room with his unsettling accuracy, and then looked back down at his noodles. Smart kid. Knew when to stay out of it. We finished lunch in the specific silence of two adults performing normalcy for the benefit of a child. Taeoh paid before I could argue about it, which I noted and set aside for later. Han thanked him with genuine sincerity and then asked if he could get bingsu for dessert. At which point I explained that bingsu was a summer food and we were in February in Chicago. Bingsu transcends seasons, Han said. It does not. Philosophically, it does. We're going home, I said. Han accepted this with dignity and climbed out of the booth. Outside the restaurant, the cold hit immediately, sharp and clean, and I was grateful for it. And it gave me something physical to focus on that wasn't the warmth of the corner booth or the way Friday had sounded in Taeoh's voice 20 minutes ago. The SUV was at the curb. Hyeon, who had apparently decided that Taeoh was a permanent fixture of the afternoon, climbed in without being asked. I stood on the sidewalk. Taeoh stood beside me. I need to explain the Serin situation, he said quietly. You need to take us home, I said, equally quiet. And then you and I are going to have a conversation that Hyeon is not present for. Agreed. Good. We got in the car. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a building on Wrightwood, a 12-minute drive that felt considerably longer. Han fell asleep against my arm somewhere around minute 8, which he would deny if asked, and I sat with his weight against my side and watched the city move past the window and did not look at Taeoh once. He did not push. That was the thing about Taeoh that had always undone me. He knew when to be still. Most powerful people filled silence compulsively, couldn't tolerate the weight of it. Taeoh used it like a tool. He could wait longer than anyone I had ever met, and his waiting always felt intentional, like patience was a form of pressure he had mastered. It was working now, and I resented it deeply. The SUV stopped outside my building. I transferred a half-asleep Haeon to my arms, which he tolerated with minimal protest, and carried him upstairs. Taeoh followed without being invited and without being told not to, which was a line I was going to address shortly. I got Haon into his room, got his shoes off, got his jacket hung, and pulled his blanket up while he murmured something about stegosaurus bandages. I stood in the doorway of his room for a moment. Taeoh was behind me in the hallway. I could feel his presence the way you feel weather changing, atmospheric, impossible to ignore. I pulled Haeon's door halfway closed and turned around. Living room, I said. My apartment was not designed to impress anyone, and I had never cared about that until this exact moment, when Kang Taeoh stood in my living room, in his charcoal overcoat, looking at the dinosaur drawings taped to the wall beside the bookshelf, and the small pair of sneakers by the couch, and the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table that Haeon and I had been working on for 2 weeks. Well, he looked at all of it with an expression I was not going to examine. Sit down, I said. He sat on the edge of the couch. I stayed standing. Strategic decision. Oh, Serin, I said. Explain. The merger was my father's initiative, he said. It was announced without my agreement. I've been in negotiations to dissolve it for 8 months. 8 months, I repeated. Yes. And her coming to Chicago? I didn't know about it until this morning. My father arranged it without telling me. His voice was flat in a way that said there was significant feeling underneath the flatness. I am handling it. You're handling it, I said. Great, excellent. Meanwhile, I'm sitting across from you at lunch building something that looks like trust, and the woman who was on your arm at that dinner 5 years ago is on a plane to your city. I crossed my arms. You understand how that looks? I understand exactly how it looks, he said. And I understand why you left. Do you? You thought I was choosing her. You were engaged, Taeoh. I was being positioned, he said sharply. There is a difference. I never chose her. I never wanted her. I wanted—" He stopped, pressed his hand flat against his knee. "I went to your apartment the morning after that dinner. You were already gone." The room got very quiet. I looked at him. He looked back at me, and the levee I had been watching him maintain all day finally showed its first real crack. Not collapse, not drama, just one thin line of fracture running straight through the composure. "You were already gone," he said again, quieter. "And you took something with you that I didn't know I'd lost." My chest hurt. I did not let it show. "You should have come sooner," I said. "Imran, you had 5 years. I didn't know where to look. You run a Fortune 500 company. I didn't know I was looking for a child, Jiwon." His voice cracked, just barely on the last word. "I didn't know." I turned away from him, walked to the window. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago did in February, gray and relentless and indifferent. A bus moved down Wrightwood. Someone below walked a dog. The ordinary world, continuing its ordinary business while mine stood in pieces in the middle of my living room. "You want to know why I really left?" I said to the window. He said nothing, waiting. "Because I was 3 weeks pregnant and alone in your hallway, and I heard your father on the phone telling someone the Siren engagement was good for the company and good for you." I paused. "And you didn't correct him." Silence. Long, heavy, total silence. "Jiwon, you didn't correct him," I said again, steady, clear, not accusatory, just true. And I was standing there with a secret I hadn't even told myself yet, and I thought, if he won't defend himself to his own father, he will never defend me. I finally turned around. So I made a decision, and I have lived with it every day for 5 years, and I do not regret my son, but I have never stopped being angry about that hallway. Taeoh was very still on my couch. His face had done something I had never seen it do before. It had simply, completely given up on composure. "I didn't know you were there," he said. "I know." "If I had known—" "I know," I said again, softer. "That doesn't fix it," he said. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." We stayed like that for a moment. Him on my couch, me by the window. 5 years in one hallway and one child asleep down the hall, sitting in the air between us like something that couldn't be moved, only walked around carefully. Then Haeyeon's voice came from the hallway, drowsy and certain. "Appa, nah, I'm hungry again." I closed my eyes briefly. Taeoh made a sound that was grief and something almost like laughter pressed together. "He's definitely yours," he said quietly. "He has your eyes," I said. "He has your everything else." I looked at him. He looked at me. And somewhere in that exchange was the first honest thing we had said to each other that wasn't wrapped in history or defense or 5 years of accumulated hurt. It was small. It was not enough. But it was real. Hahan appeared in the doorway in his socks, blanket draped over his shoulders like a cape, looking between the two of us with the assessment of a general reviewing a situation. "Are you still figuring it out?" he asked Taeoh. Taeoh looked at him. "Yes." Haeyeon nodded, satisfied. "Okay, we have leftover rice if you're staying." He shuffled back to his room. The offer hung in the air. Taeoh did not look at me. He looked at the doorway where Haeyeon had been. Why, and something in the way he looked at it told me that whatever came next, whatever I decided, whatever it cost both of us, he was not leaving Chicago. 2 people, 1 hallway, 5 years of silence that just ran out. Act 8 is where they both have to face what they actually want. And wanting is the most dangerous thing of all. He was not leaving Chicago. I knew it the way I knew weather. Not because he said it, because of the way he looked at that empty doorway where Haeyeon had just been, sounded like it was somewhere he had been trying to find for a long time without knowing he was looking. I knew that look. I had worn it myself the first time I held Haeyeon in the hospital and understood, with complete and terrifying clarity, that every decision I made from that moment forward would be measured against this person. This small, new, entirely real person who needed me to be more than I had managed to be before. Taeoh was having that moment now, delayed by 6 years, Hari standing in the middle of it in my living room with his coat still on. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You should eat something," I said, Because I was raised by a Korean mother and feeding people was the emotional response hardwired deepest, even when those people had complicated histories with your heart. Taeoh looked at me. You're feeding me now, he said. I'm feeding Haeon. You happen to be present. I walked toward the kitchen. Don't read into it. My kitchen was small and honest. No aesthetic, just function. A magnetic knife strip Haeon was not allowed to touch. A windowsill herb situation that was thriving against all odds. And a refrigerator covered in his drawings and a school calendar. And a reminder I had written to myself 6 months ago that said simply, you are doing fine. I read it sometimes when I needed to. I reheated rice and the leftover doenjang jjigae from 2 nights ago, moving through the familiar motions of my own kitchen while Taeoh stood in the doorway, because my kitchen was too small for 2 adults and whatever we were currently carrying. He watched me cook the way he had always watched things, completely. Like whatever he was looking at deserved his full attention. It used to make me feel seen. Right now it made me feel like a document he was reviewing for inconsistencies. Stop analyzing me, I said. Oh, I'm not. You have your analyzing face on. I have 1 face. You have 7 faces. I cataloged them. I stirred the jjigae. That's the one where you're deciding whether the information you have matches the conclusion you've already reached. A pause. Does it? He asked quietly. Does what? The information. Does it match? I set the spoon down and turned to look at him. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, coat finally off. Ichor draped over the back of my couch, and in my kitchen light, he looked less like the CEO of anything and more like someone who was very tired and trying not to show it. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and has nothing to do with sleep. What conclusion have you reached? I asked. He held my gaze. That you made the only decision you thought you could, and that it was the wrong one, and that you know that. Yes, and that you've been living with it the same way I've been living with not knowing. He paused. That we've both been punished enough. The jjigae bubbled quietly behind me. I turned back to the stove. That's a very neat conclusion, I said. It's the true one. True and neat are not the same thing, Taeoh. True is messy. True is 5 years and a child who just met his father over japchae. I portioned the rice into bowls with more focus than it required. True is Saren landing in Chicago by the end of the week. I'll handle Saren. You keep saying that. Because I will. And your father? Silence. I carried the bowls to the small table by the window, the one where Han and I ate every morning, the one with the permanent crayon mark on the left corner that I had stopped trying to remove. I set them down and turned around. Your father, I said again. Who announced an engagement without your agreement and arranged a visit without your knowledge? How exactly are you handling a man who runs your life like a subsidiary? Something shifted in his face. Not anger, more like recognition he hadn't wanted to arrive at. That's not fair, he said. I'm not trying to be fair. I'm trying to be accurate. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Because if you walk back into our lives, Taeoh, you're not just walking into this apartment. You're walking in with everything attached to you. Your company, your father, your family's expectations. And I have spent 5 years making sure none of that could touch Haeon. I looked at him directly. So before Friday means anything, I need to know that you can actually stand between us and all of that. Not theoretically. Actually. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the kitchen, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat down. He folded his hands on my crayon-marked table and looked at me with a particular stillness that meant he was about to say something he had thought through completely. When I was 24, he said, my father told me that Omegas were a liability in the Kang Group's public image, that if I bonded with one, I would spend the rest of my career managing perception instead of building legacy. He paused. I didn't argue with him. I said nothing. I didn't argue because I didn't have a reason that felt bigger than his logic. At 24, legacy felt real, and love felt like a risk I could defer. His jaw tightened. And then I met you, and deferring stopped feeling like strategy and started feeling like loss. But I didn't know how to say that. I didn't know how to choose something my father hadn't sanctioned. I know, I said quietly. I'm saying it now. I hear you. Jiwon. He leaned forward slightly. Wish I'm 33 years old. I have a son who just offered me leftover rice like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I am not 24 anymore." His voice was low and certain. "I will handle my father, not because it's easy, because there is no version of my life where I walk away from that kid down the hall. Or from you. Not again." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, the February light had gone gray and soft, afternoon settling into early evening without fanfare. And I looked at him across my small table with his hands folded and his eyes steady, and 5 years of everything sitting between us like a guest who had overstayed but hadn't yet left. "You hurt me," I said, not accusatory. Just true the way I had said the hallway thing, clean and direct in mine. "I know," he said. "You don't get to just decide it's fixed." "I know that too." "Friday is not a reconciliation," I said. "Friday is dinner, one dinner, with our son. And we take it from there one thing at a time." He nodded once. "One thing at a time. And you talk to your father this week, before Friday, not after." "Yes. And oh, Saren, I will handle it before she lands." I studied him. He held my gaze without flinching, without performing, without the corporate composure that had been his armor all morning. Just his face, just the truth of it. "Okay," I said finally. It was a small word for a large thing, but it was the first okay I had meant in 5 years. Hyeon reappeared in the kitchen doorway, blanket cape still on, looking at the table with calm approval. "You made jigae," he said. "I did." He climbed into his chair, picked up his spoon, and looked between us. "Are you still figuring it out?" he asked. Same question as before. Different weight now. I looked at Taeoh. Taeoh looked at me. "We're getting there," I said. Haon nodded, satisfied, and started eating. Kang Taeoh picked up his spoon, and for a few minutes in my small kitchen with the crayon-marked table and the windowsill herbs, and the note on the refrigerator that said "You are doing fine," we were just 3 people having dinner. It was fragile. It was not fixed. But it was real. My phone buzzed on the counter. I reached for it without thinking. The message was from an unknown number, different from Taeoh's, and it was 4 words. "We need to talk." Below it, before I could process, a second message arrived. A photo. Taeoh and me outside the coffee shop on Halstead this morning, standing close, his hand visible through the window frame. And below the photo, one more line. "I'm already in Chicago, oh, Saren." My hand tightened around the phone. Across the table, Hyeon was telling Taeoh about the informal lane system at recess. Taeoh was listening like it was the most important thing he'd heard all year. And I sat between the warmth of that and the cold of my phone screen and understood that the thing Taeoh had promised to handle had just walked through the door early. She's already here, and she has a photo. Act 9 is the last act, and nothing about it is going to be easy. But easy was never the point. "Stay with me." I set my phone face down on the counter with the careful deliberateness of someone diffusing something. Across the table, Han was explaining the lane system with full hand gestures now, illustrating the trajectory of Minjae's wrongful lane crossing with the seriousness of an air traffic controller. Taeoh was listening with his spoon halfway to his mouth, genuinely absorbed, asking follow-up questions that Haon answered with increasing enthusiasm. I watched them for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds of something warm and impossible and completely inconvenient, given that the woman in the photo on my phone was sitting somewhere in this city with my number and a camera, and what I could only assume was an agenda. I picked my spoon back up. I finished my jiggy. I was not going to let Saren detonate my dinner table. Not this one. Not tonight. After dinner, Haeon negotiated 30 minutes of television with the skill of a seasoned mediator, secured Taeoh's vote before asking mine, and then looked at me with an expression of complete innocence that he had absolutely inherited from no one, because I had never been that calculated in my life. "Majority rule," he said. "You're 6, I said. "This is not a democracy." "It's trending that direction," he said. I pointed at the couch. He went, triumphant, blanket cape trailing behind him. I looked at Taeoh. He was pressing his lips together in a way that meant he was fighting a smile and losing. "Don't," I told him. "I didn't say anything." "You were about to." "I was going to say he's extraordinary." I looked at Hayon on the couch, already reaching for the remote, already completely at ease, already acting like this afternoon had always been part of the plan. Yeah, I said quietly. He is. I stepped into the hallway while Hayon watched his show and pulled up Seren's message again. 4 words and a photo in a city. I typed back, "What do you want?" The reply came in under a minute. "Just a conversation. No lawyers, no drama, I promise." I stared at it. Then I typed, "Tomorrow, coffee. You pick the place." 9 a.m. Her reply was a single word. "Thank you." I put my phone in my pocket and stood in the hallway for a moment, back against the wall, looking at the ceiling. From the living room, I could hear the low sound of the television and Hayon's occasional commentary on whatever he was watching, and underneath that, the sound of Taeoh's voice responding. They were talking. My son and his father, 2 hours into knowing each other, talking like it was something they had always done. I closed my eyes, breathed. Then I pushed off the wall and walked back into the living room. Taeoh left at 8:30. Han extracted a promise from him at the door, solemn and binding, that he would return on Friday with his appetite because Hayon intended to teach him how to make ramyeon the correct way, which apparently I had been doing wrong for years. I used the exact instructions on the packet, I said. That's the problem, Han said gravely. Taeoh crouched down to Hayon's level at the door. They were eye to eye, same dark irises, same quiet steadiness underneath, and something about seeing it straight on like that. The undeniable physical fact of them made my throat tighten. Friday, Taeoh said, a promise. Friday, Hayon confirmed. He stuck out his hand. Taeoh looked at it. Then he shook it once, with complete seriousness. Hayon nodded, satisfied, and shuffled back toward his room, announcing that he was going to bed voluntarily, which was a historic event and should be appreciated. I stood in the open doorway. Taeoh stood in the hallway outside it. The building was quiet around us. On someone's television 2 floors up, the elevator humming distantly. February cold seeping under the stairwell door at the end of the hall. He shook my hand, Taeoh said. He's very formal about agreements. I noticed. A pause. He gets that from you. He gets the dinosaur obsession from nowhere I can identify. Taeoh looked at me. The hallway light was doing something honest to his face, stripping the last of the day's tension away and leaving just the man underneath. Tired. Certain. Omnipresent in a way he hadn't been this morning when he was still the CEO outside the school gate. Tomorrow, he said, whatever you're handling, let me know if you need anything. He knew about the message. He had seen my face when I read it at the table, and he had not asked, which meant he was respecting the boundary and the pace, which was both correct and quietly noted. I'll handle it, I said. I know you will. He held my gaze. You've been handling everything alone for 5 years. I'm not asking to take that from you. I'm asking to be someone you can put something down with when you want to. The hallway was very quiet. I looked at him for a long moment. That was a good sentence, I said. I've been thinking about it since the coffee shop. It shows. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more careful than that. Something that understood it had to be earned the rest of the way. Good night, Jiwon, he said. Good night. Taeoh. He turned toward the elevator. I watched him go, and I did not feel the way I felt this morning when his scent hit me on the sidewalk outside the school. That had been panic, old fear dressed up as instinct. This was different. This was something quieter and more dangerous. This was the beginning of choosing. The meeting with Seren lasted 40 minutes. She came alone. No lawyers as promised. She was composed and direct, and nothing like the polished image from 5 years ago's press release. She was a woman who had also been positioned, managed, and moved like a piece on a board she hadn't designed. She knew about Han. Taeoh's father had told her 2 days ago, as leverage, as a way to complicate the dissolution of the merger and bring Taeoh back to the table. She slid a folder across the coffee shop table. I'm not marrying someone who doesn't want me, she said simply. And I'm not going to be used to take something from a child. She nodded at the folder. That's my formal withdrawal from the merger agreement. My lawyers filed it this morning. I looked at the folder. Then I looked at her. Why are you telling me? I asked. Because Taeoh's father is going to come at you next, she said, and I thought you should know it's coming. She picked up her coffee, finished it, set down exact change on the table and stood up. He chose you, she said quietly. I, without bitterness, without performance. 5 years ago, he was already choosing you. He just didn't know how to say it out loud yet. She picked up her coat. Make him say it out loud. She left. I sat with the folder and my coffee and the morning light coming through the window and thought about hallways, about the things people say and the things they don't, and the distance between those two things where all the damage lives. Then I picked up my phone and called Taeoh, where he answered on the second ring. Saren withdrew from the merger, I said. A beat. I know. She called me an hour ago. Your father's going to come at me next, she warned me. He won't get the chance. His voice was quiet and absolute. I'm meeting him in an hour. It ends today. Taeoh. Yes. Say it out loud, I said. Whatever it is, say it. A pause. Longer than his usual ones. The kind that meant he was not composing. He was just arriving at something true. Shirani, I want to come home, he said. To whatever home means now. To Friday dinners and ramyeon lessons and a kid who shakes hands like a CEO. A breath. To you, if you'll let me. My chest did the thing it had been doing all day. That complicated, painful, warm thing I had stopped pretending wasn't love a long time ago. One thing at a time, I said. One thing at a time, he agreed. But yes, I said. Hush, you can come home. Friday came the way good things do when you've stopped bracing for them. Quietly, without announcement. Han made Taeoh stand at the counter and watch the ramyeon process from start to finish, narrating each step with the intensity of a cooking show host who took his audience very seriously. Taeoh stood exactly where he was told, asked exactly the right questions, and ate 2 full bowls with the sincerity of a man who understood that this was not about noodles. When after dinner, Hyeon fell asleep on the couch between us, boneless and warm, one hand curled against my leg and the other tucked under his cheek. The apartment was quiet. The city moved outside the window. Taeoh looked down at Hyeon with the expression he'd had in the front office that morning. That devastated, unguarded thing. Except now it wasn't grief sitting behind it. It was something that had found its shape. He really is extraordinary, he said softly. I know, I said. He looked at me across the sleeping weight of our son. Thank you, he said, for keeping him safe, for all 5 years of it, for doing what I should have been there to do with you. It was not an easy thing to receive. It cost him something real to say, and I could hear that cost, and I held it with the care it deserved. Don't waste the next 5, I said. I won't, he said. I promise. Between us, Haeon shifted in his sleep, sighed once, deeply satisfied, and was still. Outside, saw Chicago move through its Friday night, indifferent and bright and alive. And inside my small apartment, with the crayon-marked table and the dinosaur drawings and the note on the refrigerator that said you are doing fine, I looked at the man across from me and felt for the first time in 5 years like that note was actually true. Not perfect, not fixed, but true, and true I had learned was the only place anything real could grow. He smelled like cedar wood and promise. And this time, I did not hate him for it. Like, comment, subscribe, and click on the notification bell. Thanks for watching.